Part 45 begins at the edge of culmination, not because the questions have ended, but because the pattern is now unmistakable. What transpired between Jasmine Crockett and Pam Bondi has evolved into something larger than a hearing exchange. It has become a case study in how democratic systems metabolize controversy. The ever-present shadow of Jeffrey Epstein ensured that the conversation carried historical gravity. Crockett's insistence on explicitly acknowledging survivors did not merely challenge a witness, it challenged an institutional instinct to default to procedure. Bondi's composed reliance on legal framing did not merely defend a record, it defended the architecture of due process itself. In that collision, viewers witnessed not chaos, but calibration, the visible negotiation of two forces that democracy depends on: moral pressure and structural discipline. By this point, the deeper narrative is clear. Crockett's approach consistently emphasized that acknowledgement is foundational to trust. In her view, when institutions fail to speak plainly about harm, they risk appearing detached from reality. Her tone communicated that visibility is a form of accountability, that recognition of impact matters as much as technical explanation. Bondi's posture consistently emphasized that institutions derive legitimacy from consistency. In her view, retrospective analysis must be anchored in the legal standards and constraints that existed at the time decisions were made. Her steadiness communicated that fairness depends on resisting the temptation to reframe history through present-day emotion alone. Together, these positions map the terrain of modern oversight. The symbolic force of Epstein's legacy intensified that mapping. The case remains a cultural reference point for systemic vulnerability, a reminder that influence and power can obscure scrutiny. That symbolism elevated the hearing beyond procedural routine. Crockett's insistence signaled that institutions must publicly demonstrate they have internalized the lessons of such failures. Bondi's framing signaled that institutional correction must occur within lawful parameters. The friction between these signals was not accidental. It was the natural byproduct of a system confronting its own evolution. Another enduring element is how the exchange reframed public expectation. The audience watching was not passive. Viewers absorbed the dynamic and recalibrated their own standards for what accountability should look like. Explicit acknowledgement is now part of the benchmark, so is detailed procedural explanation. Future officials will walk into oversight settings knowing that both dimensions are mandatory. This dual expectation strengthens institutional transparency, even if it complicates the process. Democracy rarely becomes simpler as it matures. It becomes more layered. It is also important to recognize what did not happen. The exchange, though intense, remained within institutional guardrails. That containment is itself evidence of resilience. Democracies are not defined by the absence of disagreement, but by the presence of structure during disagreement. Crockett pressed, Bondi defended, the framework held. That is not trivial. It demonstrates that friction, when bounded by rules, can clarify rather than destabilize. The hearing became a demonstration of tension harnessed rather than tension unleashed. Over time, the cumulative effect of moments like this reshapes institutional culture. Staff prepare differently, language evolves, acknowledgement becomes more direct, explanations become more comprehensive. These are subtle shifts, but they matter. They represent a system adjusting under scrutiny rather than resisting it outright. The Crockett-Bondi confrontation joins a lineage of oversight moments that quietly push governance toward greater articulation and self-awareness. And now, as this long narrative arc reaches its reflective close, the central lesson crystallizes. Accountability in a democracy is not a single gesture, nor is it a static standard. It is an ongoing alignment between empathy and order, between acknowledgement and analysis. The exchange illuminated that alignment in real time, with all its tension and imperfection. For the public, the takeaway is not merely to replay the confrontation, but to internalize its implications. Demand clarity, demand context, demand recognition of human impact, demand adherence to law, because democratic strength lies not in choosing one over the other, but in insisting that both coexist. The hearing may have ended, but the recalibrated expectation it produced continues, in policy rooms, in public discourse, and in the collective understanding of what meaningful accountability truly requires.